This video is sponsored by EA. Thank you for supporting the channel and providing early access to Wild Hearts. Well, it's about time we had some new giant monster hunting action around here, and when I say new, I mean brand new IP and everything. I was fortunate enough to get early access to Wild Hearts, the newly released monster hunting action crafting game developed by Koei Tecmo before release, and I have many thoughts to share about many different parts of the game. I spent some time debating whether to make this some grand hour-long review, nitpicking every single part I could think of, or if I should just focus on what makes this game unique and sets it apart from its contemporaries. And well, if you're here because you want to hear about the monsters, the combat, and the world, you've come to the right place. Let's not waste any more time. I am Peak Ginge, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's jump straight into my review of Wild Hearts. It's always tricky to know where to begin with reviews. What do people want to know first? Where does your interest mainly lie? So with that being said, be sure to check the chapters of this video and watch the parts that you want to know the most about. We'll start with the boring stuff to get it out of the way. Let's talk about performance. This is usually a question mainly asked by PC players, and I myself have been playing the game on PC, so I'll share my experience. From a technical standpoint, I haven't really had any glaring performance issues, but the game doesn't run anywhere close to 60 frames a second, so if that's something that puts you off, keep that in mind. I've had two times when my frames dropped to about 20 frames a second, and they were both in sections of the game where there were a lot of snow particle effects going on, so I'd hazard a guess that's what was causing it, and the devs have mentioned that there will be patches in the future to address these issues. My PC is above the recommended requirements, so if you have a less powerful machine, it might struggle a bit. As for bugs and glitches in the game, I did have this one time where a monster was just running around in circles, which I don't have footage of, and this other time where a character just said all of their dialogue all at once, but overall, it seems to be pretty tight for me, and as I understand it, these issues are being patched out day one. On the negative side, the load times are super long, like, my lord, we're talking minutes at a time when switching between maps, so that's certainly not ideal. All of that being said, my experience is not everyone's, and I know there have been some folks encountering performance issues, particularly with AMD hardware, so be sure to do your research and check out some other videos on Wild Hearts to learn more about those issues. So with the boring stuff out of the way, let's have some fun with it, and set the tone of the whole game by first focusing on the world as we look at the characters and story. The story is, well, it's there, I suppose. A brand new world awaits you in the form of Azuma, a region inspired by feudal Japan interwoven with a wide range of mythological and over-the-top environmental elements. Here you'll find the Kemono, huge beasts formed by the fusion of nature and animals who command the ecosystem around them and often threaten the lives of people and cities nearby. You are a hunter, a traveler who finds himself in Minato, a village struggling to survive amidst the chaos of a world gone wild. And, well, yeah, that's basically the setup for the entire game, and frankly, that's all you really need for a game like this, I think. The story facilitates the gameplay and sort of takes a back seat a little bit, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, unless you really are looking for a really rich, deep story. As I said, your main hub is Minato, and it's really pretty and aesthetically pleasing and all that, but it is far too big, with all of the main vendors and NPCs being in different parts of town. Yes, you can fast travel around, but I just want all my stuff to be in one place, please. Thank you. The pacing of the story is also just all over the place, particularly at the start of the game. You go from being a wandering traveler to finding a little bit of technology to being almost dead and suddenly infused with that technology within about 10 minutes. You then get to see the first map, which you can be lost in for hours, and fight the first 3 Kemono before even touching the town, and once you make it to the town, you then go from being a newcomer to meeting every character and owning a home within a 2-minute cutscene. It also does that thing where you spend ages in the first 2 maps, but the next 2 are just sort of rapid fired at you. Again, a pacing issue, I think. But I digress. It's nothing if not efficient with your time and knows where you want to be spending it, out there hunting new monsters. Each of the NPCs are actually quite interesting, I would say, and their characterization is a nice touch. You got some standard tropes like Ujishige, who is this old retired disgraced samurai who only wants to sit around and drink sake all day, as well as some fresh touches like Natsume, the young earnest blacksmith, and Tamakazura, the bathhouse attendant. Overall, the setting lends itself well to the story and gameplay being presented here, but it is far from unique and original, even within the monster hunting space itself. The visual style and aesthetic of the main town and the characters is all quite unique and avoids feeling generic for the most part, and the representation and diversity is pretty solid too. Each character has a clear voice and personality, and I actually really enjoyed interacting with them, which was a nice change of pace with modern gaming. The story itself is nothing to write home about, which may be a downside for you, but for me personally, it's not a big deal. I'm someone who likes the story propping up the gameplay rather than the other way around. So that is the overall setting of the game. Feudal Japanese inspirations and colourful characters in a colourful world, but only a small portion of the game is spent in town and with these characters. So let's take a look at some of the key parts of the game's locales. Throughout your time with Wild Hearts, you'll come to know 5 maps in total, each of which houses its own unique set of enemies and locations to find. The map designs are focused on providing large open areas to face off against the game's many enemies, whilst also providing a bunch of little nooks and crannies to explore and house resources. I personally found that the earlier maps are more complex, with more to find, whilst the later maps tend to focus more on the combat aspect. As for my thoughts on each map, the first 4 are each based on a different season: spring, summer, autumn, and winter, in that order, with the 5th being a secret that you'll have to find out on your own. They are surprisingly big and diverse. I mean, everything you're seeing on screen right now is all just from the first map, and they do a great job as staging grounds for each of the Kemono fights. I'll avoid spoiling too much for each of them because there is a certain wonder to be had traversing them for the first time, but put simply, the Harugasumi Way is a forested map full of old temples, big trees, winding rivers, and twisted paths. The Natsugadachi Isle is a tropical locale with beaches, caves, and ruins to explore. The Akakure Canyon is a mountainous area cut in half by a deep river with ruined temple grounds and huge caverns being the main staging grounds for battles, and the Fuyufusagi Fort is a destroyed castle buried under a mountain of snow with some forested areas and a frozen lake thrown in there too. As for traversal, the player character is very mobile, and when running can vault up and over just about anything with enough persistence, so the varied terrain isn't really a problem. Use of the Karakuri, which we will talk about in a minute, makes traveling around the map a blast, and if you're really planning out, you can just have a whole lot of fun chasing down monsters and traveling around the map. My thoughts on the maps, again without spoiling too much, is that they are for the most part quite coherent and well structured. The visuals are striking and the game looks great, like the colors really pop and makes for a feast for the eyes as you're running around. I would have liked a bit more depth here and there though. I'm someone who loves that speculative biology and fake ecosystem stuff and all that sort of stuff these games come up with. It hits just right, so more of that please. And so now, with all of that talk about story and map locales, there's probably one thing on your mind. What about the monsters? Let's not wait any longer, let's talk about the Kemono. No monster hunting game is complete without its monsters. They are the essence of the whole thing and what keeps us coming back for more again and again. So how do the Kemono, Wild Hearts iteration of giant monsters, shape up? The core concept of the entire game is the power and mysticism of nature and the creatures that live in it. As such, the basic premise of Kemono is that they are just each regular animals from the real world that have been infused with elements of nature to create giant beasts. These Kemono now siphon power from the world in the form of celestial thread and can completely destroy ecosystems if left unchecked, which is where you come in, but we'll talk about combat in a bit. All of that is to say that if you see this thing and think to yourself, hey, that's just a big fire monkey, well, yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's the intention behind the design. It's basic in concept, but it is well executed for the most part and allows for a wide, diverse roster of monsters, particularly for the first entry in a series. All in all, as I get deeper into the game, I like the Kemono more and more. At first, I would say they were a bit of a mixed bag. Some of them feel really concise and tightly designed, whilst others are all over the place and actually had me pretty frustrated at some points. It takes a good amount of time to learn each of their tells, and several of them have multiple different attacks with very similar telegraphing. I would say in general the anticipation for each attack could use some work, but I think it boils down to it just being a brand new game with brand new enemies, with brand new animations, and it just takes some getting used to. Oh, and also the weapon I've chosen requires you to be really good at reading the tells. Again, more about that in a minute. There are also several variation mechanics in the game to further diversify the roster as well, including mighty versions of monsters which increases their difficulty, variation on the quest to add modifiers of different kinds, such as the monster always being enraged or having a damage amplifier or something, as well as what I'm going to refer to as subspecies, because I'm not exactly sure what they're called in-game. As for my particular thoughts on each Kemono, I'll probably go a bit more in depth in a future video, but there are a few very notable ones I'd like to touch on that showcase the best and worst parts of the combat. The King Tusk is the big boy you probably saw in the marketing for Wild Hearts, and it's one of the earlier Kemono that you go up against. I hate this thing, and that hatred ultimately boils down to it just being way too big. As I said before, I have a little bit of an issue with the anticipation in this game, and for those who don't know what anticipation is, it's basically the animation before the animation that the character is about to perform, so you know what attack is coming and can see the weight behind it and all that good stuff. And maybe it's just me, but Kemono can be bloody hard to read sometimes. At first, I chalked it up to a lack of experience, but to this day, I cannot properly read King Tusk. It is so big you can barely tell what's going on when you're up close attacking it, and to top it all off, it's slow enough that it feels like its attacks connect a split second after they should. On the contrary, an example of a monster that has great telegraphing is the Dreadclaw. I got absolutely destroyed by this thing the first time I versed it, but as soon as you realize its attack patterns and understand that its goal is to just charge at you over and over and over again, you can kill these things in a few minutes at a time. And that feels really, really good. And lastly, the first wall I encountered. The Lavaback. This is the fire monkey you've likely seen, and it put me through the ringer. Given the time-sensitive nature of my coverage of the game, I tried to just push past it, but the Lavaback was not having it. This thing is out for blood, and you have to respect it, or you are gonna have a bad time. Enemies that wall you are important in games like this, and give you a reason to stop, reassess, and go and get some better gear, and Lavaback is one of the best examples I've seen in quite a while. Oh yeah, there's also a bunch of smaller Kemono that wander around the map, and they are either completely ignorable and passive, or a little demon hellspawn that can and will interrupt your combos and give the big ones a layup into a dunk on you and your health bar and send you back to camp before you know it. There is no in between. The positives of the Kemono certainly outweigh the negatives. They are striking and for the most part, a lot of fun to fight, but they are also the source of the most frustration you'll face in the game. They can be hard to read, some of them move so fast that your brain hurts after versing too many in a row, and they might damage your pride a little when you first go up against them, so be prepared to persevere. So if you're taking down a Kemono, you need something to hit it with, of course, and there are plenty of choices to be made in Wild Hearts to suit your preferred playstyle. So let's talk about the weapons and armor. In total, there are 8 to choose from. 5 once you finish the tutorial, including the Karakuri katana, the Nadachi, the bow, the maul, and the bladed wagasa, with another 3 available once you get through chapter 2, being the hand cannon, the claw blade, and the Karakuri staff. For context, here's a brief rundown on how each of them play. The katana is your straightforward hack and slash weapon. The damage is high if you just keep attacking, and you've got lots of opportunities to dodge and combo. If you've got no idea what to go with, it's going to be your safest bet. The Nadachi is a big sword with big slow attacks. I personally find it too slow and not worth the risk-reward gameplay it's going for with its attacks, which is pretty ironic considering it's the sort of weapon I would usually gravitate towards, but not this time, I suppose. The bow is less about high, constant DPS and more about putting a bunch of stacks on a Kemono before popping those stacks all at once with one of the piercing attacks, which is pretty satisfying, I must say. It does feel very stiff though and highly immobile for the playstyle it's encouraging. The maul is a wildly oversized hammer that is what you'll want to learn if you're someone who just likes seeing individual damage numbers be higher than your friends all the time. It's also comparatively slow, but doesn't feel as disheartening to whiff, and is best paired with a lot of the Karakuri combos. It was the weapon I started with, but ultimately not the one I stuck with. The bladed wagasa is the best weapon in the game, in my humble opinion, and easily the most fun and compelling to combo with. The entire focus of this weapon is countering enemy attacks before unleashing a flurry of your own, and it's so satisfying to counter a monster's full arsenal and take them out in a matter of minutes, or seconds even. I will say though, that this is a rough weapon to learn. The counter window is absolutely tiny, and you will be brutally punished if you are even just slightly off. Couple this with very few of the monsters sharing animations and attack timings, and you get a combination that means your first encounters with most of the new monsters are gonna be a little bit rough. The hand cannon is exactly that, a cannon that fits in your hand and it outputs some crazy consistent damage as long as you know how to keep your distance. I'll be honest, I've only used this once, so I don't have a whole lot of experience with it, but it was pretty fun, I guess. The claw blade is the most mobile weapon by a country mile and focuses on embedding a chain in the Kemono before flying around them and weaving in and out of attacks. It is fun as hell and is worth giving a shot just for the spectacle alone. And then the Karakuri staff, which is the weapon for you if you just want to play every single weapon. It's the only transforming weapon in the game and will mutate from a staff to a polearm to a shuriken to dual blades in some sort of order I cannot discern. I think it's random, I could be wrong. Once you've comboed mutation attacks, you can then unleash the Juggernaut blade, which does more attacks the more stacks you have. It's definitely cool, but I just like a couple of the other weapons more. So after all of that, I will say this about the weapons. They are quite diverse and will most likely support your preferred gameplay in some way or another, but there are clearly some that have been given a bit more love than the others. With the speed at which the Kemono attack, particularly in the late game, it feels like you'd be crazy to not use a fast weapon, and it seems some just straight up out damage others, so perhaps there's balance issues there too. The upgrade system is one of the ways the weapons really shine though, as you can carry skills between weapons and build most weapons into most other weapons. So if you really want to min-max, you can start on one end of the tree, grab a favorable skill, and transfer it all the way to the other side of the tree to get the stat that's an element you're after. All in all, they're a good fun time and feel unique from things we've already seen in the past in other games. As for the armor, it's a pretty standard affair, I'd say. Armor is made by using monster materials and provides skills and resistances relevant to that monster, of course. The interesting part though is the way you upgrade it. Rather than just boosting stats, you can choose to convert it into either the human or the Kemono type tree, which will boost its stats but also unlock certain skills depending on the tree you choose. It's certainly a cool way to diversify and customize your character, and a nice touch for general build diversity as well. And now we come to one of the main draws of the game. Everything we've covered up until now has been pretty standard for a monster hunting action game. You need characters, locales, equipment, and monsters to play the game, but what really sets Wild Hearts apart? Well, there's one answer to that question, and it has to be the Karakuri. You've probably heard me say this word a few times throughout this video, but what I've been referring to is effectively the crafting and building element of Wild Hearts, and whilst on paper that may seem a little odd, it is actually kind of crazy how seamlessly it fits into the game. The mechanic is overall very unique and interesting. It can be a little bit janky at times when you're trying to do something really quickly, and kind of difficult to pick up at first, but it is super rewarding to use correctly. The resource for the majority of these is called Celestial Thread, which is readily available throughout the maps and gained in battle by dealing damage to the monster. There are 3 kinds of Karakuri crafting: Basic, Fusion, and Dragon Karakuri. Basic Karakuri are sort of building blocks you need to pull off crazy combos and are the most frequently used ones. They consist of boxes used for platforms to help move around the map and during combat, springs to quickly move in a certain direction to clear a gap or dodge an attack, gliders to descend slowly from high places and combo into attacks as well, and lanterns to light the way and ignite your weapons with fire, amongst several other options. These alone give you so many options in combat, but wait, there's more. Fusion Karakuri are exactly what they sound like, combinations of basic Karakuri in a certain formation to make bigger, more complex weapons and tools. For example, stacking basic boxes in 2 stacks of 3 side by side will fuse them together to make a bulwark which blocks and deflects enemy charge attacks. Stacking 3 springs will create a giant mallet that will slam down and disrupt enemies channeling big attacks, and combining a box, a glider, and another box will make an elemental lantern that absorbs a nearby elemental attack and makes said element weaker within its area of effect. These are super cool, and some of my favorite parts in the game occur thanks to these fusions. As a side note, I will say these fusions are not available from the beginning, and instead are given to you gradually in the middle of hunts when your hunter has a flash of inspiration the first time you see certain monsters doing certain big attacks. It's a really fun system, and I enjoy it a lot. The third type is the Dragon Karakuri. These are more permanent fixtures and are used to build out your bases and set up permanent means of traversal around the map, such as zip lines and this cool big wheel thing you can roll around in. The base building is also pretty in-depth. You can set up tents for resting and fast traveling, a forge to make gear, a campfire for going on quests, and several different stations to make food. These also use a different resource. You gain elemental charges by powering up dragon pits by feeding them materials, which you then spend to make Dragon Karakuri. Confusing at first, yes, but pretty straightforward once you get the hang of it. Overall, the Karakuri system is simply awesome. I like it a lot, and it does a great job of setting this game apart from its contemporaries. It's a system that at first glance is woefully overcomplicated and just difficult to envision how it fits into the very fast-paced combat, but it just works, and it clicks so easily you'll use them as second nature not long after you start your journey. And once you figure out your combos, you'll find it hard to stop using them if you run out of Celestial Thread. You can also upgrade all of your Karakuri as your game goes on to make them more durable and stronger, as well as unlocking new ones with the Kemono orbs you obtain from breaking their parts. It is a great innovation that elevates the combat in every single way. Now, let's have a little chat about the other stuff. Things that are kind of small fry and don't really get their own big section, and honestly, this is home to some of the most lackluster systems in the game, I'd say. I guess I'll call this section Miscellaneous. First things first, the most half-baked mechanic in the entire game, where the Karakuri's mechanic is a delicious chocolate cake with creamy icing and a little cherry on top. The hunter's arm is just all of the ingredients of the cake thrown together and left outside in the rain. Does that analogy make sense? I'm not sure. Anyway, the hunter's art is something you execute when you damage a part of the Kemono's body, then you jump onto them, climb over to said part, and break it off, giving you a burst of Celestial Thread. And it just kinda isn't very good. Sometimes you just don't grab onto the Kemono, other times you miss your mark and try to climb over to the right place, but you just barely move at all because the climbing is so sluggish. It's easily the least competent mechanic the game provides, and it's entirely missable and completely unnecessary, I think. The food system is rudimentary at best, and is simply a matter of picking picking up food items and shoving them in your mouth for temporary buffs. There are means to process your food to enhance these buffs, but it is also quite bare bones and not terribly innovative. The quest system is pretty straightforward as you get generic quests as you progress, and side quests from NPCs that need your help, and the game is broken up into chapters with certain Kemono and maps locked to specific chapters. The cool part of this is you can roll back the map to previous chapters whenever you want or need to take on easier stuff at any point. The story also runs parallel to the quest system and is entirely objective focused rather than giving you specific quests to complete, which is a weird way to go about it, but ultimately doesn't really alter the experience very much. The multiplayer is hard to assess prior to the launch of the game since there just isn't a very high population in the servers. And also I live in Australia, so my hashtag real gamer hours don't align with the rest of the world very well. From what I've seen, it works fine, but there have been some growing pains with the servers, which I think are meant to be fixed as of launch as well. You can join people who ask for help mid-hunt and take on quests in their world. A pretty standard multiplayer experience, really. And last but not least, every hunter needs a companion, and Wild Hearts gives you the Tsukumo. These are sort of little ball-shaped robot dudes that accompany you on a hunt and can be found throughout the maps. After you find the first one, you have one with you at any given time, and he can be upgraded to have more attack, defense, and supporting abilities. I don't know how much damage they do, but I mainly rely on them for healing and for giving me resources for the Karakuri. Overall, they're there, they're pretty fun to have around, they make cute little robot noises, and yeah, what else is there to say? They're a fun little companion. And well, that's Wild Hearts, folks. A brand new entry in a very underappreciated genre. Wild Hearts gives us a fresh take on the monster hunting concept and does some fancy new things along the way. It knows who its audience is and it plays it safe for the most part, but the innovations it brings do indeed shine through. Honestly, time constraints when covering games for review purposes like this can dampen my excitement levels a little bit, but it ticks all the boxes I'm looking for from a game like this. Is it perfect? No, absolutely not. But it is a lot of fun, and if you're looking for a brand new roster of monsters to fight with a brand new set of weapons in beautiful brand new maps, then this one will be for you. I am shocking at consistency when it comes to providing numbered scores for reviews, as I'm better at articulating my thoughts with words and numbers, but if I had to rank Wild Hearts, it would probably get a solid 8 out of 10. It's worth your time, and I personally will be playing a lot more of it in the future. Thanks for watching the video, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. This was my first experience with sponsored content, so I hope it met your expectations as a viewer as well. If you liked what you saw, be sure to give the video a like, and why not share it with a friend who may be interested in Wild Hearts as well. More videos are on the horizon, and a lot of ideas are bouncing around this backwards cap-wearing head of mine, so be sure to stick around and see what the future holds. Take it easy, folks, and I will catch you on the next one. See you later. Huge beast formed by the fusion of nature. Nature? Dude, what are you doing? Read the words.